Yeah, we've updated some stuff at City Hall. Did some painting up for the first time in 15 years. So it's about time we get with the times here. We got
they're still perfectly usable.
Exactly. Yeah, but we've not even complained.
That is the person in charge of our branding. It's a little.
So you're about to have a high-speed come part. We're all like, they're fine. I get it. Protect the brand.
They're going to bring us some new ones. Those are kind of old. But there's 5, 6 of us on campus, so we need something.
Yes.
Well, if one of these is seen at the office, it's confiscated.
It is.
Why is that?
It's
because it's
out of brand.
Okay.
That's probably as old as Dean Sellers. Now you remember.
Oh, yeah. Dean taught us a thing or two.
A few things,
He was a good guy. Then we got the Greg.
Do you have the right candy?
Look at that.
Do you need to swap some stuff before we start?
As long as I get my Reese's, we're good. I'm running low on Milky Way, I've noticed.
Well, what is it? You want to give me a list of all the candy you want?
I'm going to rate them in order.
I had all Milky Way, and then it's like, well, where's the Reese's? And I was like, well, what do you want?
I can win.
There's no Milky Way in this one either.
No, because I switched over to Reese's.
I think I ate all the Milky Ways, probably.
Well, Reese's are good for you.
Is that it? All right.
Reese's are good for you.
Well, I have 6:30. I know Councilmember Benaj said that he was going to be coming back from Salina and was going to do everything he could to be here by 6:30. So hopefully he's getting here quickly but safely. Not sure what Councilmember Elsoff is, but I will go ahead and send a quick text. Oh, actually, hold on. Jim Benaj sent a text 9 minutes ago. He said that he's 11 minutes out and will be there shortly. So I'm okay hanging tight for a couple minutes before we start if you guys are.
I talked to Councilmember Elsoff earlier, and he's planning on being here, so must be running a little late.
Yeah, so we'll do that. So just a note to everybody watching at home and in the audience, I know it's after 6:30, we're going to wait just a couple minutes. Roll call. Oh, is this for me?
Yeah, for you to sign.
Oh, okay. Meanwhile, we have a fall festival coming up on Saturday. We'll promote some city business there. Hopefully the weather is going to hold out.
It's supposed to rain.
It's supposed to be kind of rainy and cold, but you know, this weather can change. Heck, a month ago we were predicted lots of snow and got nothing, so you just never know. But
Did you tell Tristan, Todd,
we're gonna.
What's that?
that I would help wherever she needed? As long as it's not raining.
Hello. Okay. Not sure where. There he is. Okay, perfect.
How are you? Great.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Appreciate, like I said, everybody watching at home or later letting us delay the start here a couple minutes, but we're all here. Tonight's workshop, we're going to talk primarily about the Woodlawn Expansion Project. We're going to hear from MKEC. We're going to hear from our CFO, who's going to talk about different financing options, and then our third thing, we're going to talk about some marketing things that we've been talking about as a governing body for quite a while. And I just want to open up before I ask MKEC to kind of take over and show some things. Just a brief history here, if you will. And I've learned, I've mentioned we've been talking about the Woodlawn project. We've been waiting for this for years. And it was, over 15 years ago that WAMPO originally agreed to fund this project for the city of Bel Aire. And drawings were made. The railroad signals were moved back to accommodate the 3-lane, and then, quite frankly, the city reneged. So I think we're very blessed and lucky that WAMPO still considered this a project and allowed us to reapply and get to where we are today. And despite what the Wichita Eagle reported yesterday, where it says Bel Aire is getting ready for a huge project that will begin next year, the widening of Woodlawn from 37th to 45th Street North. It's already decided that Woodlawn from 37th North to the railroad tracks will be 5 lanes. I don't know where they got that, because we can't decide that. We aren't even going to decide that tonight. What we're here tonight is to get the information and talk about it so that we can make this decision at our next meeting on Tuesday. Like I said, so we're not going to make that tonight, but I think it's time that we do this. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we do. We've had the open house and the forum. We've seen designs. We've heard presentations. We've talked about it amongst ourselves. The survey was sent out. We had a 29% return for anybody doing formal research. 29% is a good return, actually, for that. The signalized intersection was pretty much, I think, the clear winner. Even though I voted for the roundabout, I'll admit that. But the signalized intersection was the clear winner. After that, it was kind of a mixed bag between 3 and 5 lanes, with just 100 or so votes kind of separating the two. So it's up to us to take in, not just that survey, where, like I said, it's 100 or so votes, but we need to look at financing and future debt and decide what it is that's best for this community today and tomorrow. So look forward to all the presentations this evening. For those in the audience, we normally don't take questions at workshops. This is for a chance for all of us to hear the presentations and ask questions. Do want to encourage anyone listening at our next council meeting, when we'll make the decision, we will, beforehand, it'll be open for public comment. We make that a part of every single city council meeting, and we encourage anyone who wants to comment on this before we take final action. Please consider yourself more than invited. At the same time, all of the council members, myself, and our city staff, we're available. If you want to email us, call us with thoughts and concerns between now and then, we would certainly welcome that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to our friends from MKEC, who have a new logo and new coasters.
Well, thank you. As I've talked to you folks before, I'm Jay Engelmeyer. You know who I am. I'm project manager for this project. I have Jason Gish, the co-project managers, with us tonight. We brought Cindy Womack here. She's been responsible for getting the helping you get the questionnaire set up, and she has now tabulated results and can just kind of go through that. Also sitting in the back row here, or the front row, is Steve Hoffner. He's our traffic engineer on our team, and I thought he ought to be here tonight because some of the questions we may have may be traffic related. So we don't have a formal presentation other than Cindy was going to step us through just basically these results that are sitting in front of you. So I'll turn it over to her and let her do that right now.
I don't know. Earlier today I made a few adjustments to include Mr. Benage's chart, so I'd like to actually hand this back out to you guys.
Everybody,
okay.
It's what you sent us earlier, right?
We made a few tweaks also, so I just want to make sure that everyone has the most. I added some percentages to make it a little more clear on a few of them also.
Okay. I don't have to decide, so.
So this is not...
The data is accurate. I just added a few more details to it so that it would be a little clearer so when we're talking about it. certainly. So as it was mentioned, a public survey was published on March 6th and made available to the public. The public survey was made available in 2 ways. We sent out 5,355 paper copies to the registered voters in Bel Aire. The survey was also made available electronically on the City of Bel Aire website. The final date to submit responses was March 29th. I have just a few numbers here to survey summary of where we got the totals. 1,697 total submitted responses online and paper were received and calculated. But there were 23 that were returned with no name that we did not put in with the data, and also 216 returned undeliverable that were not in the data. And then 43 were returned after March 29th that were not included. So just so you know that. Very good response, like you said, really good. So question 1 was to rank your preferred traffic lane configuration for Woodlawn from the railroad tracks to 45th Street. 37th to the railroad tracks will be 5 lanes. And they were asked to rank from most desired to least desired. And the most desired option was the 5 lanes with the lighted intersection, whereas the least desired option was the 3 lanes with roundabout. And we did add the chart here. I did summarize it just a bit to show the total number of people, but also the percentages of from least desired to most desired, if you want to look at that in more detail.
Yours
but also,
better.
I'm sorry?
Yours is better.
Thank you. Above that, though, the 4 were, that data is literal. So that's why I calculated it the way I did. It wasn't an opinion, it was the literal data. So that's why there's 4 complete charts and done the way that it is and then summarized. Also summarized in the pie chart, which same kind of thing as the tubular table, just kind of showing you the percentages of least to greatest desired option. So, and that is all the data. This is all the data, not just the registered voters, just for clarification there. Question 2 was, when complete, this project will include a 6-foot sidewalk on one side of the street and a 10-foot wide shared use bike pedestrian path on the other. Which side should the bike pedestrian path be on? And 64% voted for the west side, whereas only 36% voted for the east. Question 3, how important is a signalized pedestrian crossing across Woodlawn near the Bel Aire Park? And this one's a little lackluster in its results, but 35% thought it was moderately important, which is quite a few for the amount of people that responded. Question 4, we asked in their opinion what design elements most contribute to a great street, and we were just kind of looking for them to kind of, if they did care about something other than the street, we were just trying to give them some options to speak up. Maybe this question would spark that. And overall, the walking and bike paths were 35% most important to them. So I thought that was interesting. We also spoke about improved drainage, landscape and beautification, and the stormwater, green infrastructure innovations, and the boulevard type street center median, and it goes just down from there. Question 5, which of these values most contributes to a great street? And overwhelmingly, the traffic capacity at 46% was voted. Question 6, we asked them if they lived near Woodlawn. Have you experienced surface drainage issues around or near your home? And we had 16% say yes, and 84% say no. I know that Jay studied those comments, or if they did provide any, that he studied that and could provide more data. Question 7, we asked them to share any additional information or feedback or comments that they think would be important knowing regarding this community project. And 60% left no comments and 40 left comments. Again, we have those all accounted for, and Jay did review those and pulled out what he believes could be spoken for. And the final question, how do you prefer to receive information from the City of Bel Aire? And overwhelmingly, it was your Bel Aire breeze at 43%.
with that, we also asked for specific comments, or gave the opportunity for folks to ask one just in general, but they could also ask that with some of the questions. There were quite a few of those comments, and we have read through them all, and I'm not going to go through every one of them. but there's some things and I want to be careful because the data speaks for itself. I don't want to put my own personal beliefs in any of this, but there were some things I noticed in all of those, and several bullet points that I want to bring up. One, the roundabout, even though it shows in the numbers that it was not popular, the comments made it even clearer that it is less popular than the numbers show. A lot of people referred to an existing roundabout close by. They're by K96 and Greenwich Road, and cited that as an example. If you give us one of those there, you're not doing the right thing. And a lot of folks, through our presentations, we talked about pedestrian access through the intersection. If it's a roundabout, that's one of the issues with the roundabout, and that was reiterated back in some of these comments to us too. Another item was a lot of the folks made comments about really not focusing on the capacity, the traffic capacity of Woodlawn itself, but more on, I live on a side road and it's hard to get out, and as traffic increases it's going to be harder to get out. And there was a lot of expressions of concern. Some just said, I need a signal at my street. Some said, you've got to work on this. But there were quite a few comments relating to that issue, particularly at 39th Street, some at some of the other intersections as well. There were, and these next two are kind of opposite each other, there were a lot of comments related to concerns about building a 3-lane road, and then growth is greater than expected, and we have to turn around and then expand that to 5 before the life of the project is out. And just plenty of comments saying do it right the first time. Quite frankly, that was a theme that was repeated over and over. But there are also folks who said we don't need a 5-lane. If you build a 5-lane, you're actually going to pull traffic from Wichita, Keachai, other areas, and they're going to use our road and make it into a big traffic mess. And even though those are all valid comments, I just thought those kind of were an opportunity, or folks is saying, no, we want a 3-lane versus 5-lane. And I think the responses on there were numerically kind of statistically same to what we're showing in these numbers, probably a little leaning towards the 5-lane over the 3-lane. Another comment, another theme that was expressed quite a bit was how's this going to work during construction? A lot of concern, and what we've told folks in the public is as we get further in the design, we will know more about how we're going to do that. Don't have a lot of detail now. I think we did touch on that quite a bit, and we've told folks they're going to have access to their property at all time. We don't necessarily, until we know what we're building, we don't have that plan done yet. But there were quite a few comments concerned about that. And drainage was a very popular comment. And there were a lot of comments, like I said, 198 that said they live near the project and have drainage issues. Some of those issues were not related to the project, but still there are quite a few giving specific examples of I've got a drainage issue here. And based on our preliminary design where we're at now, it was good to hear people, they're confirming what we know, that there's got to be a problem here based on how much water's coming down this ditch at that point. So that was a nice feedback to get, that people are validating what our design has showed us at this point. And then just overwhelmingly, very many comments favoring the sidewalks and the bike path. Even though on that one question it didn't. The crosswalk, there weren't very many comments on the actual crosswalk on Woodlawn, but just having the parallel paths and connecting into existing sidewalks on the north and on the south end of the project were big comments. So those were some of the bigger, more popular comments. I tried to summarize some. I wasn't going to read any actual comments here. And then there were some interesting comments as well. So I like the fact that we've got the actual comments, but then we have some nice statistical charts and things that we can use. But I think in general, the comments reflected all of the comments, or all of the questions that didn't have comments on them. So that's more or less what we found. No huge surprises from the people. I pretty much, even in the question and answer periods in the public meeting, pretty much the same sentiment to about the same percentages from what I can remember from the public meeting. So if you have any questions just about the data, or how we collected it, or just any interpretation,
just
free to
one
ask.
question, and I appreciate the 43 that were late were not counted in, because that would not be fair, because we did give them a deadline. But was there any review of those 43 at all to
No,
get any
I didn't
idea what
open
they
them.
were? Okay,
I
that's
have
fine.
them though.
No, I'm not asking you to do that because you have to cut it off at some
Yeah.
point. That's,
We just made the decision, if it was a postmark past the 29th, that we would just calculate how many there were and leave it for you guys to decide.
yeah. Okay.
Just one other thing, or maybe two other things I'll add. I was surprised I did not read one comment about an opinion on whether or not to get rid of the frontage road in front of the park and the fire station. There was not one comment. And then I thought there would be some concern about moving the parking that would be lost there over to Gunnison Street by those residences, and I don't think there was any comment with concerns or favorability about that. So those are some things I thought we would hear comments on.
Okay. Any other questions on the survey? Like I said, I think we all agree the signalized intersection was a clear winner, and I was double checking my numbers. I think I said 100. I meant more like 200-300. I'm sorry, but between the 3 and the 5, if you look at the the positive, the most desired, and we're looking at 300 votes separating the positive on the 5 and the 3, and a little over 200 on the negative. So it's to me, this isn't the overwhelmingly we want this, we don't want this. That's just what I got from that.
And there were, even on the roundabout, there were quite a few positive comments on that. And the people were vocal on that issue quite a bit.
So any other questions on the survey results? Let's talk about options then. And I do appreciate the fact that we were given the survey information over a week ago.
Yeah,
that was
good. That's great.
Good to digest and go through that. So
One thing I know that if you look at on this chart, and she repeated the start basically, so it's the same. It looks a little different, so the colors are different issues. But when we said that these 5-lane versus 3-lane are about equal, they're about equal up here at this level, but there's great separation of them from down here at the most favorable area, and this is about equal across at the moderate favorability level. So and I know we did put it out this way, and there was good reason for not putting it out this way, but if you just had a one vote, it looks like the vote would have been for the 5-lane with the intersection. I mean, it wasn't put out that way, and we didn't, because we wanted to see what that temperature was, and this kind of gives us that temperature, I think. So the temperature feels like it's 4 or 5-lane than it is 3-lane. But we do have some challenges there. I understand that, because it's about $1 million difference in price.
So,
I mean, I guess I would have the same concern with if we were to do a 5-lane with almost inviting extra traffic to come through, and then going from a 5-lane to a 2-lane north at 45th. I guess, and then for the traffic, so a 3-lane does promote more traffic at a safer than a 4-lane. Is that correct? A 3-lane is safer, and the traffic flow is better than an actual 4-lane.
The 3-lane will There's a couple ways of looking at that. The third lane is going to make a significant improvement over the way the roadway is today, because it provides that center lane not only to get left turn people out of the through lanes, but it also provides a place that people coming out of the side streets can pull into and then merge into traffic. If the amount of traffic that's on the road is all in a single lane southbound and all in a single lane northbound, so it'll take them a little longer to get on the roadway because there'll be the cars will be lined up and you got to let all those cars go through. If you're assuming it's the same amount of traffic with a 3-lane versus a 5-lane. With a 5-lane, everybody southbound is divided up into 2 different lanes, so it's actually a little easier to get out typically on a 5-lane section from a side street than it is on a 3-lane section when you start getting into higher traffic volumes. I would like to emphasize, though, that those higher traffic volumes are year 15, year 20. They're not when the roadway's first done.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just kind of my concern is overbuilding now for 20, maybe further down the road. When you look at Woodlawn, and Woodlawn in Bel Aire is not set up to have any major commercial that will really increase and drive traffic any more than what's already there. Whereas, kind of the plans for where our commercial is going to be could and should definitely switch traffic over to the east to Rock and Webb, where development and growth is being encouraged, and actually, that's where the space is for it. I just kind of look at like Central in Wichita between Hillside and Oliver. It's 4-lane the entire way, and there's probably twice as many cars on that road every single day than there will be in 30 years on this road. But we're talking about making this road a 5-lane. That's to me, that seems like not the best resources for our money. So I guess that's kind of where I sit at, just kind of looking at things like that. I mean, I know people think that a 5-lane will make it easier to get out of their side streets, but if you're turning left, then you have to cross over 2 lanes of traffic with people possibly switching lanes and passing, which could make it that much more dangerous than just the single lane. So I don't know if people think about that all the time, and I mean, there's 2 times a day this road has got some congestion, and other than that, it flows. But I think people are going to be amazed at how long they have to stop at the stoplight. I mean, even during business or busy times at 5 o'clock, I've sat there at Woodlawn and 45th, and I timed it, and I'm there 2 minutes. And it feels like you're there a long time, but I timed it. It's about 2.5 minutes. A stoplight's going to take every bit as long as that is. It does. So, yes. I think people are not quite thinking everything through, but the road definitely needs fixed and changed, and I think it's close enough that the money is a big decision with me, and I think I'd still go with the 3-lane.
I think I would take a little different approach on that, because there's a lot of opportunity along Woodlawn for retail growth. And that's where the traffic is today. It's not on Rock Road. It's on Woodlawn. We already have those traffic studies. We know what they are. And in fact, I doubt, under current conditions, you would see Rock Road increased enough to support retail for a number of years, because it's not there today. And until you get a lot more development along that corridor, the traffic isn't going to grow that much. But we know the traffic is on Woodlawn today. And there is a lot of opportunity, both more north of 45th and south, but they're at the intersection and north of 45th up to 53rd. There's a lot of places there that retail could invest in and would invest in if there was the traffic and access. But I think one of the things that we need to do, and of course we're talking about marketing at another time, but one of the things we need to do is really point that out, that we have this traffic count, and we have the average income level to really support retail. So we really are underserved in retail, and that's the area where we're underserved. And that's what the numbers support. Right? Numbers don't support that road today. It may in the future, but it isn't there today.
I just want to say a couple of things, and I don't get to vote on this, so.
You may.
But
one of us are going.
Kind of what Councilmember Benaj is talking about with the retail numbers, and this is something that when I've had those conversations with some retailers, And yeah, they're not there yet. But I think we all hope they are there soon. I guess the two things I'd like to just kind of say to get off my chest is it still kind of concerns me that we did not ask in this survey if they were willing to pay more for it. Because it's real easy to say, absolutely, I want the fully loaded, Cadillac, SUV, whatever, when you can afford the, base Ford. I'm horrible car analysis, but I'm trying to make that out. It's real easy to say that, because if you remember at the very unscientific straw poll, the very small, the group we had that turned out for the forum, when I asked, and yeah, there were more hands up, who wants the 5-lane? But when I said, what about if we had to, cut funding, add debt, maybe even look at taxes? A number of them went down. Some still stayed up. Absolutely, some stayed up. But so it's real easy to say, absolutely, I want everything. So that still gives me a little concern. In a few minutes, we're going to hear from our CFO, who's really going to talk about where we are with these debt numbers and how we're going to pay for each one. And I kind of want to reserve my judgment on which way I want to go until I hear those. Absolutely, if we can afford 5 lanes, no problem, I'm all in. But I want to see where we are. The second thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that I heard that I really liked during the presentations was that when the 3 lanes are put in, it's going to be set up where it could be added on to. That's where something we could have the 3 lanes now, and 10 years from now, maybe that's something where our debt is a lot less, and hopefully growth is there, and we can reassess and look at adding things. You can't go from a 5 to a 3, but you can go from a 3 to a 5. I just throw that out there as option C for us to, we're not saying, that would be a way we could say we're not saying absolutely no to 5, but we're saying not right now. I mean, I just throw that out there as a third option. But tell me if I'm right or wrong.
No, you're right.
Okay.
And when I talked about, we can set up the 3-lane for future expansion, whether that's adding 2 lanes on the outside or building a wider 3-lane and adding the lanes in. I think Greenwich Road's a good example between 13th and 21st, where portions of that road are a really wide median. The thought there is they can add a couple extra lanes. What I have always told staff that when we're going to design this, we will lay that profile of the road as if it's going to be a 5-lane, even if 3 lanes is out. In fact, to show that on the cross sections on the construction drawings, so there's a record of what we've done. Building the 3-lane and then coming back in 20 years and building the 5-lane is not going to be just the difference in those two costs. There's going to be some extra costs because you're ripping out some pavement you put in with the 3-lane. But it's not just we build a 3-lane now, it's not going to work, there's too much traffic, now we're going to have to scrap everything, and now we're going to spend that $5 million number. We shouldn't even be close to that. But there are things we're going to do to try to minimize that. One, making sure our storm sewer trunk line is not going to be touched. It'll just be some extra. The leader lines going out to inlets. Yeah, you have inlets. If we widen, you have to move inlets, but we can look at that, how that'll work. And so I've always wanted to get that point across, that there are things we can do to make those costs more affordable later. I don't have a very strong number. Right now I think we're looking at a $1.2 million difference in cost between the 3 and the 5. Using today's dollars to redo that, it'll cost that much and more, maybe up to another, let's say not an additional $2 million, but $2 million total. I think that's a good round number at this point. Maybe even can reduce that some if we look at that in greater detail.
About half of that cost is the railroad track.
Yes, cost, and that's that same. And I've been throwing a $750,000 number in there for that. That would have to happen later. Working with the same railroad company, that's an important consideration. I thought I have to. That just how can it cost that much? It's going to cost that much or more.
So, and then the other thing, if you went that route, the traffic signal you'd have to repurchase that again because you'd need a different signal for the 5-lane from a 3.
Yes, that is correct.
That's $160,000, right?
Well, that's part of
it. End up respending.
You can reuse depending on how far out it is,
Right.
technology is changing pretty substantially. But the poles and such, there's been many times when we've just relocated the poles, and so there's some cost savings in that.
Okay. The railroad sure drives all that. It's their crossing, you're crossing it, unless you can prove you were there first, and that's hard to do because most of the time the railroads.
So this area got its name Colorville was because of the railroad.
Yes.
Long before they lived down here.
Since we're on the topic of the railroad crossing, we're certain that a three lane option will fit at the current crossing.
It will fit, yes, and even with sidewalks, and the railroads have kind of sometimes they'll change their mind, but the general consensus now, you've seen some in places in Wichita where there's actually a little arm that comes down to gate the sidewalk. I think everyone's realized that's silly. So they want the sidewalks to go out and around the gates, which, that was my concern first looking at this. Well, we can't get the 3-lane and the sidewalks within the gates. That shouldn't be a problem. I say that again, if the railroad changes their mind, they're driving the boat here. So, but from what it looks like, and I wasn't around back then when that project was done, but if you look at it, it looks like where those gates are and given the minimum distances, it's set up perfectly for a 3-lane roadway.
Yeah, they were actually redone originally when WAMPO had agreed. I spoke to a former mayor earlier today and got some of the history update, just to make sure I was right on that. But the 3 lanes that was the original plan, like I said, 15 some years ago. And so they did have work to move the railroad crossings to accommodate them at that time.
So the current configuration of that railroad will accommodate the road and the crosswalk, or the pedestrian lane?
Yes, we're assuming we're going to take the pedestrians on the backside of the gates. They will not.
Okay.
So they will once you do that.
If they decide, if the railroad comes back and tells you, oh no, the rules are different today, you got to have the crosswalks inside those gates, what happens?
We can squeeze it in, I think, even still with a 10-foot on one side on the other. But then you get to a point where the sidewalk and the bike path are right on the back of curb. Not a desirable situation, but it's a doable situation, and I'm pretty sure we have that room to squeeze that in.
No, really, are you just going to leave it basically 2 lanes, kind of bottleneck into 2 lanes, and not have a turn lane on there just because there's
and I think
nobody's turning on the road,
right? And we have that option, I think, to bring the curb in and then back out. I don't think drivers like that, and what we typically will do is that where that 3rd lane is, there's a raised median there, and the railroad likes that. In fact, they like that better than just the 2-lane, because as the gates come down, you have a raised median on both sides, and cars, it's a lot harder for them to decide to come out and around.
Okay.
I always wondered why they did that.
Yeah, that's why.
I have learned more about railroads in this discussion. So what other questions do we have for MKUC or questions about the options? We obviously we're not taking action tonight.
So I have a question in the context of building something now that is expandable, or however you put it, Mr. Mayor. I'm assuming getting the sewer lines and drainage and all that, or whatever has to be built to accommodate future 5-lane if we went with the 3-lane. But one of the things I'm curious about is if we went with a 3-lane option, have you looked at the possibility of, instead of having a raised median and raised curbing, keeping it where all the medians and lines are just painted, so that the 3-lane could, if we wanted to someday, turn the 3-lane into a 4-lane? Can that be designed in, or how much extra work is that? Or we haven't really talked about that. Can you speak to that, or where we are on that?
If you have a 3-lane, there's a certain width there, and you're talking about if the decision is to go to a 4-lane, but we build a 3-lane now. That's
right.
What I think is talking about. There's going to be some additional cost to the 3-lane we've got in there now, just to have a little extra width in there for a 4th lane, even if you marked it to where it's not part of the lanes now.
I think if I understood your question right, you're suggesting not putting the curbs in, but just having a flat surface on the edge so that...
Right, so whatever extra width you would put beyond the, whatever, I don't know what the term is.
Shoulder.
The shoulder,
Okay.
so that the pavement and the drivable space could accommodate 4 lanes if we were to like just repaint the lanes. Is that something that's typically done? Or
No. Well, one thing we're going to do, we're turning this from the rural section with the shoulders and the ditches now, and we want to put in a curb and gutter and a storm sewer system, basically turning it into an urban roadway. And doing that, we won't have shoulders. We'll just have the narrower curb and gutter on there. And then that's where the storm inlets will go, because it's the low point in the road. And by adding enough storm capacity and inlet capacity, we can get that water in and get it down into below the ground rather than running down the side of the road. So that's the whole purpose, just going to that urban section. I mean, we haven't really considered keeping it a rural section with shoulders. And that takes just the ditches that are needed then off to the side just take that much more room. And I'm not even sure if we want to make the road wider and then keep the ditches, we'd have room for that.
Right.
But I don't think that's the direction we want to go.
The curb, I'll just add one more thing to what you're saying. There is an expense to take that curb out at a future date if you widen the roadway, but it's not a real significant expense because the way it's jointed and such, you pay for it to put it in and you pay for it to come out, but it's pretty minor expense to the whole widening project. So the curb serves 2 purposes. It provides drainage, helps us control the drainage on that roadway. It also helps control access on the roadway to define the driveways and where people aren't running up into yards and things of that nature. So as a general rule, it's better to go ahead and put the curbs in.
Will there still be a shoulder between the edge of the lane and the curb, and what will that width look like?
There will not. It'll be a standard curb, what I would call a standard, to where the gutter pan itself is probably a 2-foot wide pan from the edge of the driving lane to the actual face of the curb. So in a sense, that 2-foot gutter pan is your shoulder, but it will not be the 4, 6, 8-foot shoulders that are out there now.
Because today there's a pretty significant shoulder, and so when emergency services are coming down the road and people are pulling over or the police stop somebody, there's a place for somebody to pull over to the side. It sounds like in the proposed 3-lane configuration, they just kind of obstruct the lane.
In the areas where we would have a raised median, yes. And again, with the lane width and a raised median, you will have that gutter pan on both sides, so you do have a wider road. And we can certainly, I mean, we're right now looking at a lane width that's probably wider. It's pretty, 12 foot would be pretty standard. So you really could if a car gets over, but yeah, if an emergency vehicle comes and that car just does what they normally do, just stop in the lane or pull over, there could be an issue there. That's a good point.
I know we haven't heard from Ted yet, our CFO, and so this question is kind of intertwined with you, but when we talked with WAMPO here, 2 months ago when we had them in the meeting here at City Hall, there was a concept thrown out there about starting the project in June or July of 2020 so that we would know what WAMPO would do. How would that affect the project from your perspective if you didn't know that configuration until then? If we, assuming, let's clarify that. Assuming we went to WAMPO and said, hey, we want 5-lane, and we're going to wait until June 2020 for you to make that decision as whether you're going to fund it. And if they come back and say, well, we're not going to fund it, so then we're stuck with the 3-lane unless we want to come up with the extra $1 million. And then we would say, okay, because they didn't fund it, we want the 3-lane.
We can proceed with the design to some extent, but what the problem is, even at that point when WAMPO could commit one way or another, is so late in the process, then getting the plans to a shape where they're ready to bid is probably going to be a big challenge.
Yeah.
But there are, I mean, some of that I might have to think on that answer. I do think it's a challenge, and again, KDOT would need to be a piece of that just to talk about schedule, and I don't remember how the KDOT representative there at the meeting. I don't remember him saying, yeah, we can do that. That's going to be an easy thing to do. Although
I don't think she committed.
Yeah, well, that's what.
She just said this is the timeline.
It would be it would be tough to, waiting to that long is probably not the issue. It's then from that point, getting everything final in the timely manner is going to be what's tough to do.
Because we have to align it with the state and then with the federal budget, and that would just...
And we don't want to push the schedule back to the point where the KDOT says, oh, this money's got to go somewhere else.
I appreciate where Councilmember Benaj is going with that, because it seems like that'd be a great answer, but like I said, I don't want to go back to WAMPO a third time and say, now we're really ready, But,
well,
I appreciate what you're saying.
I wasn't proposing that, but the concept, and it was only a concept that she kind of floated out there, was you go on to make the proposal now, but they won't decide it until June of 2020 as to what they're going to fund. And then once you hear what they're going to fund, then you can move forward from there. And I wasn't sure at that time that was a good option, but I just thought maybe we should revisit it here now. Because I think, and I don't want to take anything out of what Ted's going to present, but I think the difference is if WAMPO funds the way that with the 80%, the difference is like $260,000 from the 3-lane to the 5-lane that we have to pay out of pocket. Okay,
that's a significant.
Yes, it's a big if, because the difference now is $1.3 million, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically $1 million is that we would receive WAMPO funded if they were. Now, I do have some indications from some friends of mine that are on the city advisory councils in Wichita that the WAMPO members are amenable to that, but that's still a year away. So,
and we won't be the only ones asking for that extra money too. I know someone from the Douglas Design too that's looking at stuff too. So but I wish we could do that. I really do, because I think that'd be the perfect idea, a perfect plan. But two other things I want to bring up. One, I think whichever decision we go with, and I'm going to compliment Mr. Gish here, the aesthetics, the designs I saw are going to be so much prettier, and it's going to really make a huge impact, regardless 3 or 5. I think it's going to be a huge improvement. I think the stoplight, even though it wasn't what I wanted, is going to be a huge improvement as well. A concern that I have, if you could speak to, is if we do 5 lanes to 45th, it immediately goes right down to a 2-lane. Mm-hmm. What happens there? 5 to a 2, and then it's 2 lanes all the way out to 254. Is it? I mean, how is it that just that 1 mile?
You're going to have 20 wrecks on that corner.
Well, I'll speak to the geometrics of the roadway, and I don't know if you want to, if there's any traffic issues you can add, but basically incoming southbound traffic, that's the easy part, because it's 1 lane coming into 2 lanes, and then at the same time where that lane goes into 1 to 2, you also have the left turn lane developing there. The trick is now I've got 2 northbound lanes that once you get past the intersection, they merge into 1 lane. We're not just merging that in immediately. We're extending that several hundred feet to the point where all of the warning signs that you have to have in advance of that actually happen aren't even posted until you're through the intersection. We want the folks to make the decisions in the intersection. Then it's, we're going to 2. We've done this on several other places in the community. I have never heard of an issue at any of those spots, and I can even give you some examples of where we've done this exact same thing. Not sure if the traffic's comparable, though. Central and 135th Street West have the 5 lanes, and it goes across a bridge at 5 lanes and immediately goes back to 2. Okay. There's several others, and I can certainly send staff a list of those.
I totally believe you.
In other words, we're doing that over a safe length, to where the decisions to merge 2 to 1 happen. That decision process starts after you're through the intersection.
Okay. Good.
And I would add
this question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Back to the curb and gutter, and I don't know which one can answer. How many openings for stormwater drainage along, say, from the railroad track to 45th Street? Because I don't want this street going in, and you get down on Woodlawn, almost to Douglas. They didn't put any openings in their curbing, and there's always water continually.
2 things on that. 1, a lot. I don't.
Good.
And in fact, one thing that there's a lot of places in this area in Wichita, especially where it's flat and you can put a lot of inlets, but it's just hard to get that water to the inlet. We do have a little more gradual fall, which is going to help push that water. But still, we want to get the water. One of the things, and I think I might have mentioned this in one of our meetings, is as engineers, we can put in a nice big large storm pipe and not put in enough inlets. You can't even get the water to that new storm. We will put a lot of inlets in there. I don't know how many will be there now until we've get the concept approved and then can know what our road profile is. We will be following the City of Wichita, Sedgwick County stormwater policy on that, and if you follow that policy, it's a lot of inlets. So,
well, just so there's enough that we don't have a flooded street down there.
Yes.
Wash out the highway. That's all I have.
Question I had on the aesthetics, as the mayor brought this up, it just sparked my memory that we had some neighbors on the Wood Row area say, hey, they wanted a wall there, and it may be something we should consider. If we did that, would that have an impact to the cost, or is there enough money in the cost for the aesthetics to do that, or what's your opinion about that?
I'm going to start off first and talk about mine. And we had a meeting with people from that neighborhood, and when we started out, we were talking about drainage, and then they were concerned about the issue with the wall. So we've looked at what that wall length would be, but I didn't stop there. If you're putting a wall there, you got to go all the way. And I divided it out into putting wall in front of it on all Bel Aire residents and not anything there on the east side south of the railroad tracks. But I also threw that in just to give you an idea. Some of the residents provided some bids. I think in general those were good bids, but they had disclaimers. This does not include this does. And a lot of those things they said does not include, we would require that to be included in the project. One said if we hit rock when we do our foundations, or if we hit utilities. Well, there's utilities there. They're going to be working in. This doesn't include site restoration or a lot of things like that we would have. So their unit prices I thought were a little low, but using unit prices we've seen on some of our projects is about $120 a linear foot. And given the footage there, if walls were put along, and it's the same style of wall, a 6-foot wall, and I think Jason, they comment on the aesthetic part of it, they were pretty bland walls too. But if you had a 6-foot wall along all properties, that all residential properties that either back or side to Woodlawn, that would add about $283,000 to the project in that case. If you went on further and added it along those homes that are in the City of Wichita, that number becomes $350,000. So it's a substantial cost. The other piece, if that became part of the project, all those walls would not go out in the right of way. They would go on private property. In fact, they should. A lot of times when a development comes, there is actually a wall easement. We would have to go as part of the project and obtain construction easement on those properties. Since this project has federal funds, we have to follow the federal fund format. And one of the first things you ask is, you are entitled to compensation for this easement. Everybody who wants the wall says, "Oh, no, I want, but you have to pay me for the easement," and I've seen that happen. Not necessarily in a wall situation, but in other situations. You also get to the point where my neighbor over here wants a wall, my neighbor on this side wants a wall, I don't want a wall, so I'm not going to give you an easement no matter what. Then you can't build the wall in pieces, and now you're looking at, we're going to have to condemn, and that just adds time and expense to the project. I think some of those people talked about the safety aspect too, and where the wall would be versus our street is at the most minimal place on the project would be 20 feet. And by our clear zone standards, that's on an urban street with this traffic and this speed, that's outside of what's required. So I don't think the wall is needed for a safety aspect. They also, I think in their letter, mentioned aesthetics. I'll let Jason, if you have anything to add. Some of the walls can be expensive, walls can be pretty cheap. I think what was proposed was a pretty cheap wall.
Yeah.
may be a good topic for planning commission and how we do aesthetics in the city if we, for future. It's really difficult to, as soon as you do that there, then when you go do 45th Street or whatever, everybody's going to say there's a precedent to build us a wall.
Yeah.
Which it would look great. I'm not going to deny it, but those are lots of things.
Is this something that can be separate but included in the project, and then we could basically have if they were willing to have them basically take ownership of it as a special assessment onto their properties?
We have to be careful of what you say is separate but included. And that's something I didn't mention, and I want to make sure I mention. When we get to the field check status, which is plans are about half done, they go to KDOT. KDOT reviews them. KDOT also does an environmental study, part of federal law, that any project that involves federal money. One of the things they look at as part of that study is it's a noise study, and they could come back and say, "Oh, this project's going to create so much noise, they're going to require you to put that wall." I talked to KDOT because the only place I've ever seen this happen is if a new highway is going through a residential area where there was no roadway before. Talking to KDOT, they said on a project, urban arterial like this, the conditions will have to be very rare to warrant needing a wall, and they don't think one will be warranted. If one's not warranted, they won't let you include that as part of the cost on the project.
Well, I don't mean. I mean separate as far as money wise, and together as far as aesthetically just planned. I mean,
yeah, it could be done as a separate project afterwards, and then the federal issues, KDOT issues, go away completely. If you do it as part of the project, even though it's. And I think we're to the point where the federal funds are maxed out. So if this is just something you want to do, the city is willing, to include that in. The whole issue of whether or not it's participating funds or not goes away. But you still are going to have to follow the easement requirement, the easement acquisition piece, and that's going to be a difficult process, I think, to go all these different properties along there.
Okay. I mean, that was kind of what I was thinking as far as. If they truly want a wall, maybe we could put special assessments on the property to pay for the wall. That way it doesn't set a precedent as far as the city building it for them with the cost. It would pass the cost on to the homeowners. That way if anybody else kind of comes back and was like, yeah, we're willing to help you and kind of upfront this and put that on the property taxes as special assessments, just like roads and just like anything else. I think that would be a much better precedent to set if somebody was willing to, if somebody was really wanting, something like this too. Again, it comes along with, you want the top of the line Escalade, but you're only willing to pay for the little Ford Fusion. So
that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Just trying to help you out, brother.
Appreciate it, man.
Thinking back to when we were talking about the traffic study results a couple meetings ago, I remember there was a discussion about some of the potential intersections on Woodlawn at some point requiring a traffic signal due to increased traffic count at those intersections between 37th and 45th. Does the 3-lane configuration versus the 5-lane configuration, in your opinion, have an impact as to the likelihood of us needing to signalize those intersections?
Won't make a real significant difference because as a general rule, the way we would look at that is a side street traffic. The traffic on the main street is probably going to meet anywhere along there. The minimum volumes that we look at, it's a matter of when the side streets meet it. So it would make a little bit of difference, but not a huge difference.
Okay. And something, and I think we've also talked about, is knowing that down the road there is likely to be a signal at 1, 2, or 3 of the intersections. We can go ahead and put conduit across the roadway and junction boxes, go ahead and decide where those future, our best guess, or where those future signals to be. What that does is if there's any other utilities in the way, we can get them moved out of the way now. And that's a pretty inexpensive add to the project to go ahead and put those in.
I had a question that's kind of related to my question about the curbing versus the shoulder, but I guess the median itself, we're looking at the 3-lane. In our conversation earlier, the question about emergency vehicles, I guess that's something I hadn't thought a whole lot about until this meeting here. If we have, I mean, the plan is to have a curved median in the middle for most of the length?
Not most of the length. South of the railroad tracks, there would be none at all.
There would be none.
North of the tracks, well, we'd have some right there at the tracks. But even there, hope no one's stopping for an emergency vehicle at or on the tracks. But you get north of there are a couple stretches where we have an opportunity to put a median, and we've talked about doing that just as an aesthetic issue. We don't have to. We can leave it just a marked dual left turn lane or chicken lane the whole way too, and that's something we can look into as we get into the design.
I'm really concerned about how that road's going to function for emergency vehicles if the shoulder goes away and also there's a raised median in the center.
So
and it can be a striped median. It doesn't have to be striped as the dual left turn lane. It can be just a zone where it's marked if people are still going to drive on it though.
Right. Related to that as well is the pedestrian crossing that we were talking about putting in. You mentioned in your design plans how it could be designed in such a way physically that it forces the crosser to turn and look at the oncoming traffic, which I think that's a really great idea. But can you do that without having a median raised at that point? Or
I probably wouldn't want to do that. I don't know. I can't say for certain. My initial gut feeling is no. But you could also put a shorter median there, and even some of these that we have drawn in our concepts are long. They can be divided into shorter medians to where a car is going to know, I'm in that piece, I need to pull up a little further. I'm not concerned about, we can do a pretty short median where that pedestrian crossing would be.
I guess that's ultimately what I'm asking. Yeah. Can you do like a really short
yes, we can.
section? Okay.
Is that, and that's a good idea, just a thought. Does that cause people to say, oh, I have to stop and wait for another light to continue crossing the street? I got to wait in the middle? Or how do people approach that issue when they see that? I've never seen that concept in a crosswalk. I think it's a great idea, but I just wonder, how do people approach that?
The jogs are pretty short, but I can't sit here right now and say they're X feet long.
Right.
I don't think we're talking long enough to where somebody's thinking I got to stop and wait for a complete extra signal, and they're not. Yeah, they're just something just to make you turn, and there's a car there.
Right.
So.
We normally would set the time long enough so that you could cross the street completely across. So it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work well to have people out in the middle.
The guy that's always slashing, I got to run.
Yeah, we have that issue too.
Mr. Mayor, on the agenda tonight, you have Mr. Henry coming up here after this discussion, but you mentioned having further discussion about Woodlawn after his presentation.
I think that'd be prudent.
Okay, because that's not what we have before us, right?
But
I just didn't know if there was any conversation we were holding off until after.
You guys can feel free to. Actually, Ted, you want to go ahead and come on up? And,
I'm kind of a two-parter.
Yeah, because I think what Ted has to say, would sway me quite a bit. And you guys are sticking around that'd be great. I think after we hear this, and then we can really know what we're looking at, I'll just further the conversation.
In my opinion, this may come down to being a budget issue.
Exactly.
And that's really what I kind of wanted to talk about first. And budget season's about upon us here. But really the last 3 years since I've been here, we've been operating the right way that I see a city should. And that is, we're very efficient with our levels of service and our staffing levels. We did get strapped with a lot of debt. Can't change that with land debt. But the way we operate since I've been here is we make good budget decisions, and at the end of the year when we came in under budget, what happens is we grow a little bit over 30% threshold in reserves. We look at the next year and say, okay, we can spend a little on street rehab because we have pay cash for it, a little extra money. And that's really the comfort zone you want to be in as elected officials, and the staff does. We never want to be in a position where we're really struggling just to keep the lights on, I guess.
We've been there, done that.
and that's really what I wanted to start with is, of course, we're not the federal government. We can't just approve everything we want, which I might look for a job there. But
got a pretty press somewhere.
This all really comes down as the more we spend, the less funds we have to use. And it's your guys' budget, your guys' priorities. So that's really what I'm going to start with. And we can start, I think a lot of you guys know the numbers, but I added a few different things to think about. On the top, estimate A, that's without an amendment. I think we're all aware that we're going to apply for amendment. I hope we get it, either option we choose, because we're going to save money on either option we choose. The 5 lanes, like everyone said, $3.9 million. And then the 3 lane is 2.6, 2.5, 2.6. The really scary part is if you take a poll of, and we really try hard to estimate right, but Ann's told me multiple times, and every time we even do a small project, every time you put a shovel in the ground, you don't know what's going to come back. Nobody can tell you exactly where everything is. So be cognizant that these numbers are estimates, and they might go up, might go down. I hope they go down, but we've been around these types of projects for a long time, and I've seen other communities, and a lot of times they go over even the estimates that you plan. What I did is took kind of a simple 3% true interest rate cost over 15 years. A 5 lane would add roughly $300,000 in annual debt service. If you think we spend about $500,000 on street rehab a year, that might cut in. That's pretty much the only pot we have to draw from. That's not currently being used unless we fire somebody or do something more drastic. And that's what it is. In 3 lane, there's about $200,000 worth of debt service over 15 years, and that's a true estimate, guys, because when we go to bond this, I'll classify some of it as a stormwater and say let's do that in 20 years because that's going to last. The useful life of that's going to be well over 20 years. So don't take my word on this. I just really wanted to get some numbers in front of you guys so you understand what we're going and where we're at. Again, the amendment would be a saving grace for everything. If we chose to do a 3 lane and we did the amendment and we got almost $700 million extra from WAMPO for a 3 lane, we'd only be in at $1.8 million or $155,000, which is a good case scenario. It's the same with the 3 lane. It's only about $250,000 on top of that. So if the only issue with that, and Jim could probably speak to it because he's at that meeting too, is we're asking for 1.7 an amendment. Is a little different than asking them $750,000. I'm not totally confident that they're going to say, yeah, here's 1.7 million. However, they might. Jim's been working the channels pretty hard, I think. No. But so that's another thing to really look at when you're making this decision. Is we've always since day one said let's plan for without amendment because again we don't want to be surprised. On page 2 and 3. I tried to graphically show, and it's really hard, especially with this city, because we always talk about how bad the land debt is, but it also gives a lot. I mean, if we make some inroads on selling land, and that really changes our budget. It changes everything for us. The other thing is growth patterns. We've been growing like crazy the last 3 years. It's really hard to say, yeah, we're going to keep growing like this for the next 20. I hope so, but I can't really show it. So I don't want to say this is the worst case scenario because it's not. I don't like showing everybody the worst case scenario because then you make no good decisions. but this first page is without the amendment. So on the top is a 3-lane, and the red portion is the added debt service if we do a 3-lane without an amendment. And then on the graph below that is the 5 lanes. So you can see the revenue line. We're creeping over that projected revenue line, which scares you a little bit. But if you look at the actuals, what we've been doing, 2017, 18, and 19, really 2019 really shows what I strive to do every year in our budget. Is we budget up to a certain level of our revenues, and then that green is capital expenditure, and then we throw some one-time projects we pay for cash on top of that to lower our reserve, and that's really the ideal scenario is 2019. Now, if you go back to 2018, 2017 was a banner year because we refinanced our land debt and saved some money on that, but also we're smoothing out that $500,000 bubble we had in 2020 with our land debt as well. So I know you'll see that yellow line keeps creeping up on you. That's not necessarily all. That's not Woodlawn. We're paying more premiums, more principal on our land debt every year because back in the housing crisis, we had to restructure our land debt so we can actually survive. And what we did is smoothed away that bubble. So we're actually increasing our land debt payment every year until 2020, and then it levels off. The other thing that's in there that you should be aware of, we'll be bonding for 37th Street project that felt like ages ago since we've done, but that's new city-owned debt that's going to come on, and that's represented in these charts as well. And really, there's a few smaller projects, but that's the biggest one that we have coming on land debt in 37th Street and then Woodlawn. So that's the structure over the next 5 years of where our debt's going. Again, it's a visual aid. I just wanted you to be aware of where we're at, where we're going. I won't take up too much of your time. Any questions, I'll feel free to answer. But I just want that to be part of your decision making as well as what we're giving up by doing one thing today. Is everybody kind of. I watched the workshop when we were talking about street projects and all of the list and that good stuff. There's a lot more things I could throw in the CIP, and that's where, as a budget director, I love to have is a healthy capital improvement program, and then you guys decide where we're spending that money, and then we have our priorities set, directed by the council, and executed by the staff. So,
I guess I just want to follow up to what Ted presented to us. I asked Ty to basically ask Ted to provide us with some perspective on the numbers. So what we have here is just what our current mill rate is, and it's 45.73, and the total appraised valuation, which results in our per mill collection. So this is, in a nutshell, if you multiply that 63,720 number times 45.73, that's the amount we collect in taxes for 1 year. So I thought it would be helpful for us to interpret these numbers that Ted provided, so the cost of the 3-lane and the cost of the 5-lane, to think of it in terms of mills, and to think of it in terms of if it were only by raising the mill levy, that is to raise tax dollars to pay for it, if that's all we were going to do, this gives us perspective on what that looks like. So how many mills is that? The data provided here shows that the 3-lane with a signalized intersection would be, let's see,
3.4.
Yeah, am I?
Yeah, down the bottom you got 3.4.
Yeah, 3.4. So 3.4 mills. So that's that to fund that 218,000 per year cost if it were. That's the bonded estimate, right? Yeah. So and then you can see the 5-lane. So for that 327,000 bond per year cost, it would be 5.1 mills. And I thought it's important for us to at least just have that, because I think that kind of helps. I know we're not talking about raising the mill, but thinking of it in terms of mills, I think is helpful as we think through, well, this money that we're going to bond out, we got to find that money in our budget. And so that helps me to just looking at these numbers, and I wanted to make sure we were all just have that kind of rolling around inside our heads. That
because I think the ultimate worst case scenario is being forced to raise the mill levy to pay for it.
Right, exactly. And I think we have to have that number in front of us when making this decision. Well, I guess we can chew on that a little bit, but I don't know. You guys may have looked at that already, but I just thought it would be helpful for our discussion to have those numbers in front of us.
Okay. So there's the numbers. Not super pretty either way. Yeah, that is a good guess. So, this year, we're spending $500,000 on street repairs. And kind of jokingly said when Ed was speaking, been there, done that. And I think that's what's really jumping out at me here as I'm looking at these numbers in real time. And I've seen these numbers before, but in hearing it here, just really digesting is, and maybe Councilmember Martin can speak to this too, but I can remember being on city council. I know I've told you guys this before, when we literally were looking at giving up the town charter. And we were looking at, we had a skeleton crew here, and we had minimal dollars for maintenance, no road repair. Where we are today is it's awesome. I know some of you are saying, oh my God, this is awful. No, this is fantastic compared to where we were 6-7 years ago. I don't want to go back there.
I don't want to raise the mill levy.
I don't want to do that either.
Again.
Yeah, so, and that's something that, the city was literally forced to do that a number of years ago, and we haven't raised it since.
Right.
So I say that not to put pressure, because again, I don't have to vote on this, but just that's what jumped to the forefront of my mind hearing this. Like I said, I've seen this and I've read this before, but hearing it out loud like that, and the way that Councilmember Elsop put this together, we talk a lot about flexibility. You talked about the comfort zone, and that's so. I'll just go ahead and say I think I'm leaning immediately. Knee-jerk reaction, which usually gets me in trouble, but what I asked earlier, maybe doing the option C, the 3-lane now, with the idea that whether it's us or a whole brand new council, 10 years from now, really look at reassessing when these numbers are a lot different and see if the growth is there and the debt's a lot less, if that's the time to expand to 5 lanes.
I would agree with that.
With
the signalized intersection?
Yeah, I'm not even been some roundabout.
It's pretty clear out there.
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
I don't think we would
the data
go
said
there.
that's supported.
Yeah, I mean, that's my immediate thought is looking at financial flexibility, looking at the comfort zone. He talks about seeing the real worst case. Knowing that either one of these is going to be a major improvement. And I don't like to shut the door on any conversation, so I don't, my vote would be to do a 3-lane. Don't shut the door on a 5-lane, but maybe have that conversation down the road at the time to expand it. And maybe it'll cost a little bit more, But we're also saving a number of years in interest, and our debt's a lot less than. That flexibility is what really scares me if we lose that flexibility.
I think it will be hard to revisit this project in the near to midterm future, given the large number of competing street projects that we'll have with it. If you think about what we talked about at our last meeting, we're going to have to look at all of our needing upgraded to a 3-lane or 5-lane configuration. Rock Road is going to need upgraded to a 3-lane or 5-lane configuration. Woodlawn north of 45th is going to need upgraded as well. And that doesn't include any of the neighborhood streets that we're looking at also needing replacements on. And so I think we'd be hard-pressed to revisit this project before we even, started upgrading those projects.
I think with the extra money, I think we'd be hard-pressed to even get to those projects.
Well, and that's the other thing, right, is we do have all of those other projects, and I love the idea of the 5-lane option. I'd really like to do the 5-lane option, but we have all of those other projects that we also have to do, and I think the traffic numbers are showing us that it's probably 15 to 20 years down the road that we would actually be at the capacity for that 5-lane. And I think Ann's told us also that the expected lifespan of an asphalt road is about 20 years, and so even if we put in the 5-lane now, we wouldn't be using a large portion of that asphalt capacity until it was near the end of its useful life anyway, and so we may not actually gain that much by doing it now if we're looking at an asphalt road.
Yeah, I think looking at the numbers, I was watching when MKEC presented those traffic study data, the numbers, and you had your 20-year projection, and you said that the justification for a 5-lane generally is that 20,000 number.
It's a round number, yes. Yeah.
It's a round number. I understand that. It's a loose target. And our projection went just a little bit over that, and you were asked, I think by somebody in the audience, how, based on those numbers and the data you collected, how dire is the need for a 5-lane option based on that. And my interpretation of what your response was basically, it's kind of 50-50. It's justified by the numbers, but it's not like an impressing need. And I can't help but think that 20-year projection, that's a lot. That's a long time. And I think in the light of what Councilman Smith just said, think 20 years on that road, there's going to be, it's hard to believe that there wouldn't be some sort of, reevaluation of the condition of the road and all that. And I tend to have the mindset, and I don't know, just looking at all the numbers here and everything, I tend to agree with how the mayor put it in terms of leaning towards the 3-lane option, making the most sense based on the numbers, based on the future, that, as far as we can tell, based on the traffic count. I think that ultimately weighs heavily in my mind, that the data on the numbers. And I think planning for the ability to widen it to 5, if that happens, like you said, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's wise to have the drainage plans and pre-wiring for potential signal intersections that are between the railroad tracks and 45th Street. That's a wise consideration. But yeah, I have a hard time justifying the 5-lane option here, especially when we're looking at that $1.1 to $1.3 million difference.
I think we're making a mistake. The thing is, and this is not a criticism of the analysis that Ted's done, but this is a static analysis.
Sure.
And static analysis have that problem, that they never pan out, but that's like I said, not a criticism of Ted. He's doing exactly what he should be doing. Okay. If we do the 3-lane, we will stifle the potential for growth along there.
I don't think so.
Because people will say, retailers will say, yeah, it's better, but the access still sucks. It's still not there. I can't get people in and out of my business. If I can't get people in and out of my business, I'm not interested in developing. And that's where they're going to be. That's really the only reason they're not developing today, I think, because you look at the numbers, the traffic numbers are there, and the income level is there, but the access isn't.
The problem on Woodlawn, there's only one corner on Woodlawn and 45th that's even really developable right now. You got south of Family Video, which is privately owned, and the gentleman has absolutely no interest in selling that whatsoever. I know several people have tried to buy that and wanted to develop there, but the gentleman who owns it doesn't care about it. You go north of there, you're out of the city limits anyway, besides, residential. I mean,
There's a whole lot of land on that west side of Woodlawn.
That's sold, isn't it?
On the west side of Woodlawn, I think that's private property too. That's for sale, but
they're not going to sell it. They haven't for
with
years.
the houses around there, it's not set up for true commercial development anyway. It's not even zoned for commercial, is it? Isn't it zoned for residential?
So our city limits stop at 53rd.
Yes.
Yeah, and so the south west corner is zoned commercial.
Just the one little corner, right?
Yeah,
It's not
there.
But all those lots there along that are across from Catholic Care, those large lots that all could easily be turned into retail, commercial.
Where?
If somebody wanted them.
that are houses now. Is that
There aren't any houses there. The houses are set so far back that there's a huge amount of land.
You're talking south of Family Video. Is that what you're talking?
No, I'm talking
He's
north.
talking north. He's
North
talking in
and
my
the
house.
west
I
side.
still live there.
North of her side. North of where she lives.
Oh.
Okay.
But that land belongs to the people on the corner. It used to be Saboots. Those two lots across from the church that's their land, and they're not going to sell that to retail or commercial. On the other side of Frank Willie's house, I think he's the last one. Isn't that sold to that developer that was good?
Yeah, that's all.
That's all sold.
That's all developed. Yeah.
The developer is going to put whatever houses or something. So there isn't anything left on Woodlawn up to 50.
There's other opportunities along there from 40.
Well, I'm not moving out of my house.
From 42nd. I think it's 42nd. There's a lot of land in there that's not developed.
There's only one lot between that corner house and the next house.
Well, I go count the lots.
And that's not big enough.
There's more than that. There's a lot more than that.
But up at Saboots, there's 3 lots or 4 north of Saboots. It's 3, I think.
I think 3, because that one sold to that house.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I just think it would be a big mistake if we do the thing. Yeah, I think the access is going to say, people say, it's nicer, it's better, but they're not going to be
Well,
excited.
you come to my house at 8 o'clock in the morning and see if you can get out on one lot the way it is now.
And this probably won't make any difference on that except for the traffic light, getting the traffic through and buffers, but you'll get traffic through.
Well, Central and Rock is the longest light in Wichita, I think.
And I'd like to say that we have developers knocking on our door. The truth is, this land has been available for a number of years, and even with all of our growth, the conversations I've had and the conversation I'll have next month at ICSC will all be, they've never asked me about the access. It's not until those road numbers, if they're not at this level, we're not even having that conversation. And I wish that wasn't the case, but I hear what everyone's saying. Let me play absolute worst case scenario here, because I think that's one of those things where our fiduciary responsibility is to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And Ted, when I hear these numbers, and this is not to try to say, that 5 lanes not the right way to go, but so you're talking that we would have to take the $327,000 out of the $500,000 we found for street repairs?
No. Yeah, it's got to come somewhere.
Okay.
That's. So I mean, we would surely look at the budget, but there's not $300,000, and you guys been through one budget proposal.
What type of revenue growth are you thinking we'll have just based on this year?
On this year?
Yeah, I think the new assessments are out.
Yeah, I haven't received notification from the county yet. I will as soon as I got the motor vehicle notification yesterday, but that's a fraction of what our budget is. But as soon as I do, I always send the email to Ty, and Ty filters it out. So.
And that's what this graph is showing you that Ted put together is that added debt, that red, is getting above what our growth is. And the green is what we spend money on for the $500,000 of roads that we're doing, for equipment updates and stuff like that. And you see when that's bonded, if we do a temp note to pay for the current construction at 2023, we're above that. So we either need to hope that our growth is more than, what is this, 3%?
It's actually 2% total revenue growth, not just.
So we got to hope
property,
that our growth in our assessed valuation is more than the 2%, so that we can pay for all of this. And again, there's no green in there for street improvements, other than I think in the past we've been able to budget $100,000, maybe $200,000 for street improvements. Definitely not $500,000, and then replacing equipment and stuff. So that's the benefit of what Councilman Relsoff asked us to do, is look at those numbers. So if we wanted to stay at our current, where we've got that green amount, cover that red with a property tax increase, if you were to do the 5 lane, raising 5 mills would cover that extra cost. So then we could keep operating and hopefully put $500,000 towards street improvements, but that this actual debt service, we would raise the mills to do that. Or if it was a 3 lane, we could raise 3 mills, and then we could keep putting $300,000 to $500,000 towards street improvements, and then this debt for Woodlawn would be covered by property taxes.
But what we're really talking about is a difference of $100,000 a year, $108,000.
Yeah, 218, same.
Right.
Yeah. 218, and this is without amendment, right?
Yes.
The bottom
worst case, that's
Worst case scenario,
Yeah,
218, right?
Yeah.
God, I hope we get an amendment.
Yeah.
And the thing I think the mayor touched on, it is just debt. When you issue debt, it's so non-flexible. We can be flexible with a lot of things in our budget, but the debt's the first. I project revenues, and then I take away the debt, and then I take away personnel costs, and then whatever's left is what gets divided amongst contractuals, commodities. We got to have fuel for our trucks. Right. A great example I had is I don't think snow and ice removal this year has been crazy compared to the last 3 years, and that's where we get a lot of these street project funds. Is hey, we've had a light year on our snow removal, and we came out ahead $20,000 at the end of the year. Well, let's build let's throw that into some street funds. So you're always going to have that case scenario, but you can't really say let's lower snow and there'll be some money. There's not $300,000, of course, but well, you should have a decent level, a scared level. But
if we get the amendment and we'll get if we get the whole thing or get some portion of it, then it's the bottom numbers.
It is.
And the worst case there is better than the
best case.
The best case of the 3 lane.
And the best case, or the least expensive, becomes even less, even lower.
So you cut the budget 10%.
I realize it's more risk, but I think we should go with the Wampo 5 lane and hold back on the $1 million excess that we have in the reserves now. Keep that excess. Don't do anything. Keep doing that, and then worst case scenario, we talk about what can we do to lower that debt with that million that we have in excess reserves. Just an idea to think about.
It's a fair point because we don't have our excess reserves represented on.
No, you wouldn't.
No, they're not there. Yep.
In-
And that's hoping for the best, and planning for a worst scenario, which we know is what we're looking at here.
So we have a week to make our final mind and mind
A lot
out.
to think about.
Lots to think about, lots to digest. I appreciate the presentations. We've heard justification for 3 and 5 here.
If there's anything we can do, like Councilmember Elsoff wanted this afternoon, put this together real quick.
This is good stuff.
If there's anything you think about between now and then, let us know. We'll put it together for you and share it with everybody.
Find the money.
I still think the voters I think it's pretty clear they want 5 lane. From the survey.
Well, I will vote
And the
to
costs
pay
are on there.
taxes, and I will vote
I'm
to
sorry?
take
The costs are
away
on there
from
too.
Yeah, they knew the cost. It wasn't hidden.
And I'll vote for a 3-lane and signal line.
What do you mean the cost from?
On the
On the
survey
survey.
question,
Survey question, everybody knew what the cost was.
we didn't talk. It wasn't represented in Mills, the mayor's point
Right.
earlier,
No, it
but
You wouldn't let me.
because we're not going to get rid of tax.
Right.
Honestly,
I get it. Put
Well,
that thought out there.
I think
whenever
it's
people
good that wasn't in the survey.
they would flip out. Yeah.
Yeah, they would.
I think it
flip.
would send the wrong message having that in the survey.
I
think it would have been a mistake.
Yeah. I personally would sooner use the reserves than to raise the mill levy. So.
I agree with
I'm
that.
definitely not ever going to vote for that. But
I don't want to do either.
But I don't even know where we are with the tax lid if we wanted to raise the mill levy.
Yeah, so
I think I'm going to be up quite a bit from what I've seen with my own tax.
I think so too. I think mine went up around 8%.
Mine's right to the whole city. They're going to be up a bunch.
Any other
City
questions
doesn't
for?
set that public service announcement. I filled in a few questions already. I'm sorry.
Any other questions for Mr. Henry? I see Ann Stevens is here as well, and MKEC are still here before we move on to talking about marketing.
You want to run through the fee schedule real quick, or does anybody really have a question? We didn't do much.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't do much changes.
Oh, yeah, what you're on the agenda for.
I highlighted changes in yellow, and really a lot of them are just to reflect, one, the home-based business.
Yeah, we good?
No.
Any other
That's the
MKEC
question.
questions?
no, for
MKEC.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
All right.
Thank you,
gentlemen
all.
and ladies.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing our new coasters.
You know we pay for those.
Oh,
We do?
ours are perfectly good.
Don't you see the contract appropriation?
You get paid every other week for that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A little slow tonight, eh? Go right ahead.
Fire away, Betty.
On the,
Ty would be happy to answer your question.
none of these pages are numbered again, but on the first page, on the political sign return fee and all the others are $15. How many out of the city pay or pick them up?
Typically nobody.
I don't think I remember ever collecting anything on that.
So can we have a bonfire with them?
Sure, it's your backyard.
Okay.
There's a burn ban.
There's a burn ban in
But
place.
there's a
That's
burn ban
true.
until the end of
Yeah,
April. On the page 2, administrative exception, 175. What is that?
There are times, in our codes, there's a few situations where we can do an administrative exception where Keith agrees and I agree. We can approve certain things, and like I said, it's in the codes. And so there's a fee to go through that process. You don't have to go through some other processes.
Is that enough money?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Keith proposed this because it's the same as every other variance and special use, conditional use. It's kind of another way. It's really used for small things, and it's just to keep the fee consistent amongst all the other processes.
The next one was the annual business licenses. $50, $35 conditional use permit required on Tier 3. Does this cover the time of our staff working?
Probably not.
So we're kind of giving it to them for nothing.
Well, people are still paying taxes to live here.
Yeah.
Well, so am I, but so is everybody else.
And again, that's the fee schedule is for you all to decide, what you feel is appropriate and stuff.
Well, I just want it to be enough to cover the cost of, because we got to pay staff, which everybody pays staff because they're paid by taxes, but still.
The conditional use permit required, there was a fee on that, wasn't there?
Well, it's free now.
Yeah, no, it's the way it's $175 because you have to go up to the conditional use line, and that's $175 because it has to go before the planning commission. It takes a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I thought that was the case.
Yeah.
That's why I asked that question. So it's conditional use plus engineering. That you're just referring it back up to the left.
I am, or I can we can really put anything we want right there, but I just.
Okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and correct me if I misunderstood that. I thought when we passed the ordinance on the business license, we did require that Tier 1 to pay for a business license of any sort. Is that correct, or am I didn't remember that correctly?
If you remember and Jackie explained it, the Tier 1 is for the smaller or the really tiny business that has no impact on the area, and they're not even required to register. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know who's out there to send a renewal letter out.
There's not a business license involved.
Exactly. There's no.
So, but the Tier 2 person would be paying the $50 plus the $35. Is that what that's?
No, just the $35. These are the annual home occupations license. The business license, and I don't know why I have it highlighted. I should probably unhighlighted that, but
so that's like a retail business?
It's a separate. All your businesses are like your standard business. They pay a business license, and then the occupational home is a different tier.
I thought this was getting into
some
of this stuff. I didn't remember us doing that. Okay, very good.
No, you're fine.
On page 5, court costs. $83 is an odd number. What's the deal?
State sets it.
They set it.
Yep. And that was the new one, as well as the driver's license reinstatement was $122, which is also another odd number.
Used to be $150.
Yeah.
Oh, so we don't even control those?
No. I called my court clerk, and she said that's what they are this year.
That would be really interesting to indicate on here in a separate column.
Yeah.
Which ones are council discretionary and which ones are not.
I think we can go above and beyond. I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't talk out of turn. I'll ask our court clerk.
I mean, we don't need it today, but for next year when we look at this, that would be excellent to have.
Yeah.
Okay, on page 9, on the lights, brakes, horns, and other equipment. Mm-hmm. If they don't know it's out, like I don't know anybody that walks around their car and somebody's inside the car stepping on the brake, or they check their blinkers to see if they're working, or the headlights are on, and that type of thing. So if they got those fixed and brought back the repair bill, is that still the same thing as, and they weren't charged
Police
for
could
it?
sign that off without a fee. Is that what you're saying?
They signed it off, but
Without a
they
fee.
still had to pay the court costs.
Oh, there was a court cost?
I think.
Yeah, so I think they would, because the way our system works now is when they issue a fine, it automatically goes into, what's that?
Summit. Or
their ticket paying system.
Digiticket.
Digiticket. and then the court clerk picks it up, and then I think then at that point they could go to the court, show the judge that they got it repaired, and then like you're saying, then I think he could waive the fine and they just pay the court costs, I think.
So why can't you waive the court cost?
Because you're going in front of the judge.
Yeah.
Is there a way, Kansas state law, that they could come to the actual police station and,
They used to be able to
pay like a $20 fee for the officer to actually check like if there's a headlight out. Pay a $20 fee after you get it fixed, and that the officer can go and check the headlight is working now. What was written up, we'll sign off on the ticket. Because $83 court cost for a headlight out if you get a ticket is a lot.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can take care of it for a smaller fee.
At one
I
time,
thought they had to go to the prosecutor once.
Yeah.
at one
They have to
time,
go
you
to
used
the
to be able to,
prosecutor, but it would be the guy the chief could annul the ticket or whatever. They didn't go.
they could sign it off, you have to go away with
I
it.
still think
With
there
the
should be a
fine.
fee, like $20, because you're still asking the officer to go and check. So, I mean,
Well,
there should still be.
Why go to court if you get it fixed?
Well, I know, but that typically is what happens. Usually people don't go to court, so they usually won't pay the fee, right? If you just
They have to pay the
Well, you
fee
don't-
even to the prosecuting
You
attorney.
don't go to court, you get a bench warrant put up for you.
Or you could come in and pay the $20 fee.
Yeah.
Fee and
Yeah,
it
usually
doesn't go
you
to
just
court.
pay.
Well, let me tell you, it was
Isn't
a
the
number
fine
of
different
years
than the
ago, and it was in.
Yeah.
No, fine and the fee are the same.
It was a few years
Fine for
ago.
court cost is $83.
Oh, court costs are different. Yeah.
And light equipment offenses is $60
That's what I'm
and
saying.
on down.
Don't you normally just
But-
pay the $60 and then you're not going to pay the court fee?
Right.
You got to go to court.
No, that's not true.
No,
If you
you
don't
don't
go
have to go to court.
Yeah.
You used to.
If you
could
want to
go-
fight it, you go to court, but you can just pay the fee and not go to court.
I thought you had to pay both.
Hold it.
Do you?
Hold it.
That's what my question
It's
is.
my turn. If you go to court, you have to pay. You show the prosecuting attorney or the judge that you have this fixed. An officer goes out and checks it. They come back in and they have to pay the $83, but what it costs to get it repaired is off the ticket. And it's not considered a moving violation. If you go get it fixed, you can also bring it in to the prosecuting attorney before court. And she or he can dismiss the ticket after the car is checked. And they don't have to go to court, but they still have to pay the court fee,
Right.
whether you go to court or not.
That's what I'm asking, if we can avoid the $83 by
That's what I
having it
said.
done a different way. Yeah, we're saying the same thing, Betty.
Okay.
Just a different way.
All right.
I think we all would
I
like
think
to
we all
see
agree.
that.
I think we just want to understand how it works.
If you can't do that.
Well, and I'm
I don't
not
know if
sure
we're
it
allowed
works
to
that
do
way
that.
now.
Right.
Ty's going to have to ask
Yeah, we'll get. I'll have
Jackie.
Jackie get the
Yeah.
answers for you.
Yeah.
Because
Because
I don't think
I
it's
think you
fair
should
for
get
them
rid of the
to-
court cost if you could avoid. If you don't have to go to court, why are you paying court costs?
Yeah, well,
You have to
and
go.
I got a ticket 16 years ago, my first year in Bel Aire, and I was working like, I don't know, 70 hours a week and just didn't have time to go get my tags. It was 2 days after they expired.
Oh boy.
I got pulled over for expired tags. Hey, I knew it. He pulled me over. I was like, yep, okay. Well, the only option I had, I went and got my tags, got my proof, but the only option you had was you had to show up at that court date. And then you had to, show the prosecutor, and it was the middle of August. There's 118 degrees outside. I had khaki shorts, a button-up shirt, and
boy.
dressed
Have you gotten
nice.
over
and-
it?
You got
No, I'm still not over this. I'm still not over this because the prosecutor is like asking about,
you got to
different
find
things,
the
and she's like, well, the judge won't see you in shorts. I'm like, seriously, it's 110. I'm in khakis. I'm dressed nice. This guy's in an orange jumpsuit, and the judge is okay with that. But so she got the judge to sign it. She had to go talk to the judge, have her sign it, and then I was still paid I think it was $40 court cost at that time. So, but yeah, just in this, it's set one night. people's schedule is tough. I mean, if we could just make it easier for, somebody, like you said, a headlight out or something. I mean, obviously if they don't show up or don't take care of it, it goes the same way, and bench warrant and everything like that. But
I want to share, this happened in the city of Eastboro. To me, it was over 10 years ago. I got pulled over because I had my license plate tag was out. And the officer came up and he said, and the ticket that he gave me, I cannot remember the specific days, but I had within a certain window to show that it was fixed, and the ticket was null and void then. It was a fix it or ticket, and it was something where, I'll make up numbers, don't quote me on this, but it's one of those things like, after 5 business days, if you've not come back and show that it's fixed, this ticket becomes active, it's in the, something like that. And the reason why I remember it is because when I was sitting in the parking lot and the officer came out and looked, the lady backed into me.
Oh, great. So I guess my question is, could we have that kind of a system today?
Yeah.
If we don't have it, could we put that in place?
Yeah, because I like to fix it.
I don't see any sense in charging people court costs if a police officer could sign off that ticket and be done with it and not even
I don't
follow
know
the
if
court.
the police officer can, but the chief could. Or
Well, okay, whatever. That's what I'm asking is that we look into. What can be done and avoid this court process, like Jeff said. Mr. Haas said.
The also good thing about digital ticket is chief can run a report on how many people actually do pull over for. I mean, it's really easy. So if we can have an informed discussion on it, that's another reason. Is are we making a new rule and law and administrative policy for 0 people? And that's another new government type solution as well.
Well, and it could be, are they pulling me in? It's obviously a safety hazard if somebody has lights out or
100%,
turns out. So, I mean,
are we giving warnings?
Giving warnings where it could maybe they do need the actual do this or it is a fine type thing instead of just a warning. I don't know.
Okay.
Yep, we'll check into that.
It's really why we like the system.
Don't worry, I'm done.
Okay, so what's a non-vehicle sound amplification system? PAR. What does that mean?
After I get what I was doing.
So this is, Chief asked for this one to be put in, and CAR is, so there's a general, and Ty, you might be able to explain it better, but there's a general policy where the judge can determine the fine no more than $500. And that's the way I understand it is if you have blaring music, that kind of thing, then they can issue a citation.
Is this blaring music coming from a car or
Car
blaring music from your house?
required.
Non-vehicle, so it looks like non-vehicle.
So if they're called to break up a party or something.
Yeah, I believe so.
Like at a house.
What page is that?
The mayor has the drink.
I don't know.
Well, you didn't invite us, so let's turn it in.
Yeah, so Ted's right. So they'd have to go to court and the judge would assess a fine.
So that's what that is. It's a variable fine to pay what the judge said.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yours is single printed, mine's double sided.
Oh,
I did want to ask, my 2 questions are, can you tell me what is the difference between a vendor's license and a peddler license? I mean, isn't that one and the same?
So I think they're coded the same, but I think in the business there's probably 2 different meanings.
One's
There's
only
one of them door to door.
Peddler's door to door, I believe.
Yeah, what is
And
it?
vendor is like
They're asking.
imagine like a food truck would be a vendor.
Oh,
Would that be
okay.
would that be the difference?
Yeah, one's asking to collect money for whatever cause, and the other one's wanting to sell you a product.
Yeah.
So a peddler's the one trying to get me to sign up for their new TV service or take a vape or something.
Yep.
And then one thing I wanted to bring up on page 1, sign return fee. I know we talked about that with political signs. But these all other signs, and this is my civic duty, I feel like, Saturday morning when I leave, and if I see one of those "We Buy Ugly Houses" or whatever, I pick up the sign, I throw it away. And I'm starting to see more and more of those cluttering up our neighborhood. I know darn well they didn't come in and get permission to get their fee. Is that something where they could be collected? I bet it would only take a couple phone calls to them and say, by the way, you're going to be fined this much, and we're not going to see those anymore. Or they come and get the permit.
Is that per sign or is that total? The fee?
It's per sign.
And it's a return fee,
I
right?
believe it's, yeah, so it's if we take them. So Keith will load up his car, and if someone comes and says, hey, someone took my sign, we'll say, yeah, they're illegally done. Do you want them back? And then you charge the fee.
Right. I was just asking. That was something that.
So what that is, that there's companies that actually do that. They're called bandit signs. And so you can hire a company to go out on Friday after 5, put signs out, and then they go pick them up, Monday before 8. And they do it all over Wichita, everybody, because they know that code enforcement people that pick up the signs are off on weekends. So that's why they do it, and that's how they get away with it. That's why they're called bandit signs, because they just show up and then they're gone. So the question at that point would be, do we want our police officers stopping and picking them up? And, but
If we do, it needs to be a very low priority.
Yes. I was going to say that.
So, and to be honest, I would be careful, Mayor, because if an individual picks them up, with the way the signs are, I know you're an official of Bel Air, but an individual could pick it up, and they are private property.
Even if they're put out illegally? Okay.
Yep.
So, that would be a question for Jackie. You guys are officials of the city, might be able to do that, but I think a citizen definitely couldn't pick something up like that. And so that's what we run. That's why you see them on the weekends and they're gone. Is that, and they don't have to come.
At what point does something left in a common area of a city be private property? It's the same as if I drop a cup. Is that private property or is that litter at that point? If it's in a right of way.
Well, that would be litter.
Okay, so what's to stop the sign from being litter if somebody puts it there in a right of way? What deems that still somebody's property if they've intentionally left it somewhere that is illegal to have it at?
Because the state changed all those laws.
For political
signs,
Yeah.
it's different than.
Yeah.
Maybe you should ask
I think that's
Jackie at a future.
Because, like I said, if I drop $1, is that still private property? Is that littering?
I'm going to pick it up.
That's my property.
I mean, if it's on somebody's property, I guess it becomes theirs. But if it's on the right of way, is that then deemed not private property anymore? And if somebody's, like I said, leaving something that they don't have permission, that is littering. I mean, technically, couldn't we fine them for littering?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because we've all seen it. We'll clean your gutters. We'll hang your Christmas lights. We'll buy your ugly house. Well, I don't want them even suggesting there's an ugly house in my city.
Yeah.
Because there aren't.
But I mean, like I said, at that point, I think littering could be deemed an offense on that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I'll ask Jackie to give us some clarification on that. Yeah.
So I'll add page numbers and we'll get you some answers on the court, different things by next week.
Yeah.
Why does the city charge a fee for dogs? I don't own a pet. I just noticed our first 2 line items here are dog tag fees, and the first one is for a spayed or neutered dog, and that's $10. And when I look at that, that almost just feels like a nuisance fee to me. But I'm just curious what the thought process is. And then I also noticed there are no other animals that we charge a fee for, and what the rationale is.
That doesn't work for the other animals. If you try it for animals, you'll have huge protests. Huge protests.
I'm just actually wondering why we're charging
every time.
people that
Every
have
time a
dogs.
municipality has tried to input a fee for cats, they get this flooded with protests.
Oh, man.
Yes.
And I'll speak to a little bit of that because that was a question that was asked. It's been a number of years, but what he's explained was because we have laws that you have to be vaccinated for rabies, and they're registered so that if an animal that actually protects the dog, because if a dog bites someone and they haven't been vaccinated, that dog gets destroyed and someone loses their pet. So it's something. This is actually a county-wide thing. It's not just our.
Well, actually, for the city, we do our own. So
right, but the
county does it too.
Right. I mean, it's not just us. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I think that's it. I think it's it's like the mayor says, public safety, just to encourage that and there are people that don't tag their animals. But again, that would the enforcement of that would be something that we probably wouldn't want to do.
Yeah, we don't have our police officers going up to every.
But it's just to ensure that that they're vaccinated, things like that. And if they get lost, our police can pick them up and take them home, or whatever. And then, like Jim said, I mean, a lot of cities talk about cats,
right?
But it's hard. It's difficult to do, and they don't stay within the backyard, and like a dog can stay within a fence. The cats don't, and
they'll hang themselves on the fence.
I mean, I think it's good that they're registered and they have the tag and everything. But lots of people have lots of pets. We just talked about reptiles, and we don't charge people to have reptiles. We don't charge people to have hamsters. We don't charge people to have cats. I don't know. It just seems a little bit unfair to me that we've singled out people that own dogs and are charging them a fee.
Well,
it stood out as a question for me.
Justin, because I don't think that the vet and Sedgwick County and then Bel Aire charges for dog tag. Because when you have an animal and you take it to the vet, you're paying. He collects that Sedgwick County license. He also collects a fee for himself. But you do get the proof of rabies, which they had to bring into the office to show that they had the proof of the rabies shot before a Bel Aire tag was issued. Well, they give you two tags, a Sedgwick County tag and Bel Aire tag. When I had a dog, I didn't put the vet tag on it. I put the Bel Aire tag on it. And it kind of made me angry. I had to pay for two tags. But I did. But I agree. I don't think we should be charging for dog tags. As long as they've got a registered rabies tag. Because we don't charge for cats or those things down there on 37th Street.
So I don't have any pets, and so I don't have skin in that game. It just stood out to me as something that was interesting. I wanted to have a little bit of discussion about it and see what you guys thought.
All the statistics show that older people should have a pet, but if you're on fixed income, you can't afford it.
Justin, you have to pay for your pony.
Are ponies on here?
Four-wheel. So the livestock. You didn't look at that section.
Yeah. I don't recall seeing a pony fee, but there's a lot of fees here. I could have missed it. It's possible. So.
Any other questions on fees or anything else you want to point out on those, Mr. Ted?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Thank you, Ted.
Hey, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Be a while before it's quiet at your house again, huh?
A long while.
All right, let's talk here about exactly what we're talking about here, marketing. And it was brought up a while ago that if we should have a mission statement or a slogan. When you talk about the slogan, life's better on the edge, because I truly believe Bel Aire, I did not come up with this, but I truly believe, Bel Aire is on the edge of greatness. I think we're on the edge of getting some really cool retail. I think we're on the edge of really seeing some significant debt paid down. I think we're on the edge of getting a really killer woodlawn. I think we're on the edge of the major metropolitan. But anyway, so Ty, do you want to talk a little bit more about the vision and the mission and the values?
We're pretty excited to update this. We talked about, the council talked about this our last workshop or 2 workshops ago. We've talked about ramping up our marketing. We've kind of held off on billboards because we wanted to get a good slogan that we could throw out there, and then of course Ted likes the. We'll take these down for departments. We'll actually have different goals and stuff like that he'll incorporate into the budget that will meet the vision and values that you guys approve. And you can kind of see on the second page where we come up with these values. So what we did is we took department heads, we incorporated staff comments, we went to the last WSU survey that was done a year ago to look at what people thought were the best things about Bel Aire, and that's what we came up with. So wanted to throw that out there and see if you guys have any other final comments or thoughts, and if you're ready for us to start rolling out our marketing and kind of using these to sell Bel Aire and the benefits of living.
I think it's good. I think I've mentioned this before. This is a particular question when I'm auditing. I ask clients. Okay. In fact, tomorrow morning I will be training clients on this very issue with them. Okay. And how to answer these questions. So the reason for doing that, at least the philosophy for doing that, is to instill that value in the workforce. Okay. And that includes us as council there. And so that's my only concern about this, that we don't just do this to put a paper on the wall, that we really do drive this, and those objectives that you're talking about, Ted, driving down, those are also things we go and check with our clients that we're auditing to say, do you know what the objectives are, and how are you performing to them? Because it's surprising how many answers we get that they don't have any idea. And so that becomes an issue that we have to work through in the audit report. So,
I want to piggyback on what you're saying. I've been in nonprofit management for 15 years now, and I can't tell you how many times I've opened up a meeting, whether it be with a board of directors or a community group or even our own employees, with what is our mission statement, so that it's that and that's regurgitated, and we all know that's why we're here.
But it doesn't need to be known verbatim. You want it internalized so that they understand it. So I don't expect anybody to ever tell me, oh, our quality policy is. I don't expect them to ever say that. I have something to do, but I don't expect them to say that. Yeah. But I do expect them to come back and say, well, it's quality of products on time, continuous improvement, something like that, and give me some bullet points to that, and they're golden if they do that. But so if they don't tell me verbatim, it's fine. But it's internalized. That's the good thing. That's what represents the internalization. They're telling me back in their own words what it means to them.
And that's our goal, with our mission, and that's why I had actually our staff, and I mentioned it in my last council update, was that I've got a committee now of employees that are meeting with me quarterly now, and we're just going over stuff, and they actually had input onto this, and so this is great. And so, like you said, so what we're going to do is, if council agrees with this, we adopt this, then these are going to be things that we're going to be using in our newsletters and things like that, and then we'll and that's what Ted will use, is then we'll go to the department heads and say, okay, this is our mission. These are the bullet points of our mission. What are you doing in your department to meet these? And it's like to foster a cultivated tract of growth. Okay, so we're sending out pamphlets to say, this is the time of year to trim your trees. Remember that fences need to be repaired. We're actually doing some of those things now.
Can you repair mine for me?
I've
been doing it.
Yeah, okay. Because
Words in my driveway.
Foster a connected community. So what are we doing to, we just saw how people are getting their information about Bel Aire. So what are we doing in our breeze? What do we need to do to make changes to that?
I think
and those are things
put that earlier.
Well,
not the breeze, but your information, because I don't get mine till the end of the month. It's all old news.
That's true. And so, do we need to, what are we doing on the marketing side of, Facebook and stuff like that? So we're going to take these mission statements and say, okay, each department, what are you doing to do this? And Ted will incorporate into his budget so that you see, when the budget comes up, is, these are all of our expenses, and these are the things we're doing with that money to meet the mission that you have cultivated for us. So, like I said, we're pretty excited about it, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable and that you're on board with it because it's important. You know, these are our, as an organization, ours and yours. You know, are you comfortable with these as mission and our values and our goals?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
All right.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Good.
Anything else you want to bring up?
Time to go home.
All right, good discussion.
You
Folks,
guys gotta go to work tomorrow. I need to stay in bed.
I have to leave for Topeka at 8:30 in the morning.
Oh. So at one point we had 6 people watching us on YouTube. That's what I was.
Really?
6 people, yep. For tuning in. I don't know how many were on TV watching us, but.
Pay for more bandwidth now.
Your kids watch you? What do you need?